be nice if talk shows were used to enlighten and promote understanding instead of being used to shock and titillate? For example,
welcome to the All You Ever Wanted to Know About show. I'm your host, Susan Harris, and we're pleased to shed some light on an often controversial subject, atheism. I stopped by the Atheists United information table at Venice Beach and invited some of them to be my guests on the show to answer some most often asked questions about atheism. I'm pleased to have Nick Alexander, Jill Mitchell, and Michael Sherman as my guests. Thank you all for coming.
Our pleasure.
Happy to be here.
There seems to be a lot of curiosity about atheism these days and some pretty strong opinions.
Pro or con?
Both, and some misconceptions, I'm sure. Misconceptions you'll have a chance to correct.
Thank you.
To start with, what is an atheist exactly?
Atheist simply means not theist. Theists believe in a supernatural God who created and rules the universe, a God invented by men that set the pattern for our patriarchal society, a sad day for women.
We know these myths were created by human beings like you and me, and each religion has invented a different myth. There's absolutely no evidence that any of those stories are true, and plenty of evidence that they're not true. We know now that the earth was not created in 6 days. There's evidence that it evolved over billions of years.
Well, there are a lot of folks who don't accept the scientific theories about that.
Not just a theory. There's verifiable proof that is generally accepted.
But not by everyone. There's a battle royal going on over which should be taught in our public schools, creationism or evolution. What's wrong with teaching both?
We are against teaching creationism because it isn't fact. It's a myth, but it's being presented as fact. It's unconscionable to teach our children lies, which implies that it's okay to tell lies.
Christian fundamentalists want creationism taught to our children because it sets up a God as creator and super-parent basis for a patriarchal society, a system that has caused untold suffering for a lot of women and children.
Women are relegated to second-class citizenship, and children, they have no rights at all. Thank goodness that is beginning to change.
Slowly. The creation myth was invented by human beings to control other human beings. All life on the planet, in fact. Those who think they benefit from this hierarchical structure are fighting tooth and nail to maintain their illusion of superiority.
Are you talking about Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition?
Yes, indeed, and its network of subsidiaries. We are an antidote for the current wave of radical right fundamentalism that's impacting our secular society in some very detrimental ways.
Okay, the fundamentalists are getting out of control. So, you atheists are squaring off for battle?
You bet. We're the ones, not the Pat Buchanans, who are fighting for the soul of America. We're fighting to preserve our individual freedoms.
Religious freedom, too?
Absolutely. We are guaranteed the freedom to practice any religion of our choice, as long as it doesn't conflict with the secular laws of the land. And we're guaranteed the right to refrain from practicing any religion if that is our choice.
Teaching religion in public schools is in direct contradiction to our Constitution, as it specifies in the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law concerning the establishment of religion.
Let me see that. It's been a while since I read that.
Sure, to keep this copy, it'll come in handy for reference.
Thank you. But our Pledge of Allegiance has under God in it.
I know. That was inserted during the McCarthy witch hunt era in the 1950s. It's also in direct contradiction to our Constitution.
I see, but what about In God We Trust on our paper currency?
That didn't appear before 1956. The original motto was E pluribus unum, of many one, celebrating our plurality, our unity as a people.
Pat Buchanan in 1992 and others in the Christian coalition that resulted from Pat Robertson's presidential campaign in 1988 have proclaimed this a Christian nation. But in 1797, America made a treaty with Tripoli, an Islamic nation, declaring that the government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion.
If those things are true, how did they get away with adding under God to the pledge and changing the motto on our money? I mean, why isn't it challenged?
We
challenge it. Really? We have set ourselves the task of bringing that stuff to people's attention.
Still, I don't suppose it's such a big deal.
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah. It's part of the stealth activity of the radical right to impose their biblical rules and regulations on the rest of us.
God's laws.
That's what they want us all to believe.
That kind of thinking was so disastrous in other countries that when this country was established, pains were taken to make sure that religion would be a strictly private matter, You can practice any religion you choose.
Or none, if that's your choice.
Okay, here's a question passersby pose at the Atheist Information Table. Why are you atheists out here at Venice Beach? What's your purpose in being here?
To clear up misconceptions about atheism, to render community service. We're voices of reason in an age of rampant radical rightism. One of our missions is to make people aware of the political power that right-wing religionists are grabbing. They aren't satisfied to be guaranteed their own right to believe whatever they want. They want to impose their morality on all of us.
These religious politicos are a menace to our democratic society.
Okay. I bet you get this one a lot. What's the difference between atheism and agnosticism?
Atheism just means without belief in a God or any unknown power or place. Every religion preaches somewhat different versions of these supernatural matters.
Agnostic means without knowledge, that's all. Agnostics conduct themselves much the same as atheists and humanists do. They generally take responsibility for themselves, and they prefer to do their own thinking as opposed to putting faith in others who claim a pipeline to some deity.
Well, you have to admit that religion is a good guide for raising children.
Absolutely not. Guidance from the Bible with regards to child rearing is rife with child abuse. For instance, Proverbs 23:14, "Thou shalt beat the child with the rod and deliver his soul from hell."
Well, I don't think people are into corporal punishment so much anymore.
It goes on more than you think. It's the only legal way for adults to act out rage openly and violently, so children are innocent, pitiful victims.
We don't hear about it so much, but it's more prevalent than most people realize. Churches, they like to keep that little secret about their staff and patriarchal families hidden.
Well, Michael, we shouldn't paint all churches with a tarred brush.
Of course not, but too often a poor Catholic woman with an abusive husband and father in the house goes to her priest with her problem only to be told, try not to get your husband upset, or try to make a better refuge for him, and so forth. And some even go so far as to say, if you leave, if you get a divorce, you might be excommunicated.
Well, that sounds too drastic to be true. What's the source of that information?
Stories I've heard personally, stories in the media, and just recently the Michael Jackson talk show focused on battered women, and several callers told stories like that.
Let's tackle something a little lighter, shall we? What about Pascal's wager?
Pascal was a gambler. He played the horses. His theory was, since we don't know if there's a God, it's a good idea to hedge one's bets and act as if there is a God, just in case. However, Pascal wasn't a very good gambler. He wound up broke at the end of his life. I wouldn't bet my life on his gambling advice.
Some have said, since you don't believe in God, you must worship the devil.
We don't believe in either. Devils are the invention of religionists. I mean, I've never seen a devil, nor has anyone else. So to us rationalists, the devil is just one more tool the priests and other professional religionists use to keep themselves in business.
But if you don't believe in God, what do you believe in?
We believe in ourselves and in each other, all the cohabitants on this planet. We believe in contributing to a better life here, not counting on a paradise mere mortals who couldn't possibly know claim to exist.
Okay. I thought atheism was just a personal philosophy, but you have a formal organization. Why?
Well, it's not just religious congregants who need love and companionship. We all do. It's a nice feeling to get together with like-minded people.
We emulate the competition on that score.
Also, we like to educate ourselves. More fun in a group.
And when you have more people, you get better speakers.
Free thinkers can have intelligent discussions about what our speakers bring to us.
And current events. We're trying to understand what's going on in our world and what constructive roles we can play.
On the lighter side, you can have bigger parties.
Gee, I never thought of atheists as party animals.
Not animals. We have really nice parties.
But you don't have holidays. Don't you miss having holidays?
We have celebrations. We always have a great banquet to celebrate winter solstice. We celebrate secular holidays. All cultures have celebrations tied in with the seasons. We do too.
We used to say we'd never be atheists because you don't have holidays.
Well, now you know we have celebrations.
But I never realized you had formal organizations.
Oh, yes. We organize to enjoy each other's company and to serve society better.
How do you serve society?
We inform people of things we all need to know to improve our world, and we encourage people to question authority, to think for themselves, instead of blindly obeying religious masters.
The Bible and other professional religionists start training children early on not to think, Don't trust yourself. We, the authority figures, will tell you what to do and what to think. And if you don't obey, you will suffer unspeakable torture. Come on. No democracy can survive with that mentality.
Total obedience is the undisputed principle of religious education. Lucky ones learn to overcome this mind-numbing. Some even put question authority signs on their car bumpers. But too many go through life letting others tell them what to do, starting with parents and going on to priests, political leaders. They let all kinds of authority figures do their thinking for them.
Like Hitler, who once said, "What good fortune for those in power that people do not think."
I can see you believe you have a real mission to accomplish.
That's right.
Yes.
We love this country and the freedoms it promises. We keep reminding everybody that our freedom and democracy depend on separation between church and state.
You're right about that, but religion's very important to lots of folks, like this one. I'd hate to think that when I died, that is the end. Religion guarantees immortality and afterlife.
Guarantees? That's not possible. Religion promises an afterlife. What if there isn't? You're going to get your money back on misspent time? Putting up with a less than satisfactory life here? That is not good enough, those promises.
The idea of immortality is pretty intriguing, but there's more than one way of achieving that. I believe, as Spinoza so aptly put it, that what you do during your lifetime here and what you leave behind after your lifetime is
The good you do, the people whose lives you affect in positive ways, is a way for your presence to continue in this world.
Okay, here's someone who says life without religion is empty, has no meaning.
We give meaning to our lives by doing meaningful things and by using our talents to empower and enrich ourselves and others.
Our lives have meaning if we do constructive things, if we leave a legacy of good deeds when we die. I mean, a legacy that has made the world a little better than it was when we got here.
Well, you've given me a lot to think about. But how do you respond to this argument? The brain is a supernatural creation. It didn't just happen. When you look at a watch, isn't it obvious there had to be a watchmaker?
Even if there were a watchmaker, we wouldn't know anything about him or her, or if it was him or her, or how the watch was created. Nobody knows exactly how the human brain happened or developed. Science has given us some answers.
There's no denying that science has found answers for lots of questions. In fact, here's a statement about that. Religion and science complement each other.
Religionists say that. They quote from the Bible. And rather than worrying about proving anything, they say, well, the scientist will find the proof later. As if the scientist's mission in life is to find explanations for the unexplainable. Fact is, we do not have explanations for everything. We operate with partial knowledge all the time.
We don't see science and religion complementing each other. They are separate. There is room for both. A lot of people have need for ritual and the expectation that religions encourage father figures they like to imagine taking care of them.
Okay, here's another statement and related question. There is a lot of good guidance in the Bible for ethical behavior. Aren't you willing to concede that?
Of course. We just say the Bible is not the only source for guidance in ethical behavior.
That good book does have some worthwhile things in it. However, it is full of contradictions. So how can anyone take everything in the Bible as truth, not to be questioned?
The Bible is full of bloodshed and destruction. Can you think of anything more vicious or bloodier than religious wars? A loving God? I don't think so. And theists explain incomprehensible suffering as being, quote, sent to try us. Does that apply to crack babies?
But if religion is so terrible, why have so many people gravitated to it down the centuries?
Lots of reasons. Community. And some people think they must have answers for everything. Religions give them answers. Never mind that they're made up and have no relation to fact. Accept what we tell you on faith, says the priest class. Illusion is preferable to reality for many people.
Also, it must be nice to imagine there's a kindly grandfather with a white beard overseeing everything. So, we have plenty of power-mad charlatans ready to cash in on these emotional needs.
And they're not content to restrict their sphere of influence to those who choose to follow them. They want to extend their influence far beyond, throughout secular society. Now, that cannot be allowed.
But the fundamentalists who seek to do that are a small minority.
Yes, but a small minority with tremendous financial resources. Bankrolers interested in maintaining the hierarchical structure set up in the creation stories. These people egg on wild-eyed zealots who fancy themselves superior and powerful enough to impose their will on the rest of us.
Isn't it hard to be an atheist? Don't you get a lot of negative reactions to that?
Not really. But then I don't hang around with a lot of folks who are prejudiced against anyone who doesn't think like they do. Or if I am around them at work or some other situation that I don't control, I just don't get into a debate about it. See, I'm a live and let live sort of a person. Unless someone steps on my toes, now that I don't allow.
Oh, it's true. It's not the easiest thing to be an independent thinker. But it sure beats turning one's life over to other people's choices for how I live my life, especially since I have to live with the consequences of those choices. I'll make my own mistakes and learn from them to go on and do better.
Religious zealots are a problem. It's true. They can get pretty overbearing sometimes. You sound like you all have a pretty good degree of zeal yourselves.
We're passionate about maintaining that wall between church and state.
When you see what goes on in theocracies like Iran, Algeria, places like that, it focuses one's attention on the necessity for preventing this country from drifting into a theocracy.
With the Bible replacing our Constitution, our Bill of Rights.
Yeah, that would be scary.
So we keep reminding everyone that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
I read that somewhere.
Yeah, good quote to remember.
I noticed some petitions on the table at Venice.
Yes, they're one of our tools for raising consciousness about churches not using monies not paid in taxes to fund their political agenda.
In direct violation of the IRS condition for church tax exemption that no political partisanship be engaged in, they really ignore that proviso.
And that's why it states in our petition, we are no longer willing to subsidize their political agenda with our tax dollars.
Oh, that sounds right to me. Do you find much agreement?
Absolutely. It's heartwarming. We are not alone.
Have you collected many signatures?
Yes, and we're continuing to collect signatures, which we send on to the IRS and the Ways and Means Committee in Congress, which is responsible for raising revenues to run our country.
And we have another reason in getting people to sign the Fair Taxation Petition.
And that is?
To raise awareness of the fact that there is no legal basis for church tax exemption. No laws providing for that. It has been a custom that has to stop because too many churches are swindling the rest of us, overburden taxpayers when they don't pay their fair share.
Well, sounds like you have an attention getter there.
The tax issue is a sore point for everybody in these times when we're all being faced with higher taxes and needing more social services.
It's important that people realize that the tax is not being contributed to our national expenses, are being used to further the dangerous radical right political agenda.
Rational religionists are just as outraged as we are by the antics and the growing power of the lunatic fundamentalists.
Okay, back to often asked questions. Do atheists favor abortion?
Atheists believe in free choice for those most affected by the consequences of their choices.
The so-called right-to-lifers won't take responsibility for the consequences of their choice to force others to bear unwanted children.
They claim to worry about fetuses,
which, according to the Bible, are not alive. According to the Bible, God gave Adam, a full-grown man, the breath of life.
And he presented him with a full-grown woman as a helpmate.
And there is another version where God created the male and the female at the same time. Genesis 1, verse 27. So, God created man, not a fetus, you'll notice, in his own image. Male, female created he them.
Ooh, what a biblical scholar you are, quoting from the Bible like that. Isn't that unusual for an atheist?
No.
Not at all. Most atheists were raised, indoctrinated with the religious background.
So what causes them to reject the religious heritage?
Common sense. And tremendous damage inflicted in many cases in the name of religion.
Battering of women and child abuse is a direct result of teachings in the Bible. Spare the rod or spoil the child.
Yes, we talked about
something
that.
like that.
Not enough. Abuse of women should be considered a war crime. The proportion of abuses is frightening, and so much based on the patriarchal family, which is set forth as divine intention.
The oppression of women and the limitation of their opportunities to be productive citizens in society in a variety of ways is a tremendous loss. There is so much talent wasted.
Well, I agree with you there, but I think that's beginning to change.
At long last, and mighty slow in coming.
Okay. Getting back to often asked questions, if you don't believe in an afterlife, where do you go when you die?
Well, where does the fire go when it goes out?
You usually answer a question with a question.
Did I do that?
Yes. Okay, this one says, you'll never convince me to become an atheist.
Who's trying to? It's a free country. Atheists don't missionary. We aren't in the business of telling others what to believe, what to think. We encourage people to think for themselves. There's great satisfaction in doing that, and we'd like to share that pleasure.
Here's a criticism. Atheists act too superior for my taste.
Ouch.
Some probably do. Just as in in any group. But to stereotype members of any group is not only unfair, it's a foolish mistake.
Okay, but this is a quote. All I ever see you doing is criticizing the Bible and religious people. I resent that.
Sorry. Unfortunately, some of us do succumb to the temptation to point out the inconsistencies, the blatant untruths in the Bible.
Who can resist commenting on a rich man has as much chance of getting into heaven as getting a camel through the eye of a needle? Sop for those who aren't rich.
And the meek shall inherit the earth.
Obviously, a rich man thought up those ideas to keep the meek suffering hell in this life while the rich maintain a pretty heavenly existence.
However, if you don't believe in rewards in heaven or punishments in hell, what is there to make you do the right thing?
Responsible folks act out of love because it feels good, and they act ethically because it makes good sense. You have to treat others right or suffer the consequences.
Any successful business person will tell you, you must be ethical, you must treat people right, or you won't last in business.
Well, that's true in any situation. You can't keep worthwhile friends, the respect of your children.
You're right, being ethical is common sense. You can fool some of the people.
Some other time.
Okay, so we can agree on that. Back to Venice Beach questions. The majority of people believe in God. Doesn't that tell you something?
The majority of people are indoctrinated in certain beliefs in childhood. And it takes a fair amount of strength and trust in one's own capacities to question beliefs one has been taught at a young, impressionable age.
Children trust their parents and their elders. They usually accept what these powerful big people tell them. Unfortunately, many stay with that habit way past the time blind acceptance of other people's pronouncements is no longer appropriate.
Some people stay with a religion they were raised with because it's familiar, it's warm and cozy in a congregation. They like the positives so much they ignore the negatives.
And they don't always realize how they are impacted in destructive ways.
Like guilt. What a burden.
And sin. Jesus died for my sins? Hey, I didn't exist when he died. Look, too much doesn't make sense. So some start thinking for themselves, take responsibility for making their own assessments of their situations and making their own rational decisions.
Okay, but as this one says here, there is a lot of wisdom in the Bible.
Sure, but I pick and choose which wisdom. I'm not willing to let some other fallible human being do that for me. And I look to science for valuable information upon which to make decisions.
Okay, well, you get some agreement on that. Here's one who admits scientists do some good work, but they go too far sometimes. I refuse to accept the idea that my ancestors were monkeys.
Darwin theories about evolution raise a lot of hackles, but they have been accepted by society in general, and that's why evolution is accredited for curriculum in public schools.
That battle was argued in the famous monkey trials. Clarence Darrow carved himself a place in history arguing that case.
Oh yes, the Scopes trial. That should have settled it.
Evidently not. There's still a lot of pressure to get creationism taught in the schools. I agree with your arguments against that, but don't you think children should know what's in the Bible?
Yes, the Bible is important as literature, and it should be studied as such because of the impact it has had and continues to have in the world.
And it is legitimately taught on that basis in our public schools. But it should not be taught as literal truth in all its pronouncements.
A rational person can benefit from wisdom in the Bible if such a person discerns between that which is poetic or allegorical and that which can be taken literally.
When fundamentalists insist that everyone accept everything in the Bible to be mindlessly followed, we run into some really big trouble. Like overpopulation, for one. Be fruitful and multiply. That doesn't make sense in a world today when the Earth's resources cannot support unlimited population.
Right. In the past, disease and war were population control mechanisms. Those means are no longer acceptable. We need more humane methods.
Right. Okay, here's a potent argument. Without belief in God and faith in His divine plan for us, what would it matter what we do? Life would have no purpose, no meaning.
We, each of us, must discover our purpose, our role. We must look into ourselves and discover who we are and how we can best contribute to society.
Well, that makes sense. Okay, what about this one? When facing danger or when your problems are overwhelming, who do you atheists turn to?
To our own inner strength.
And to each other, our families.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we're all one family, you know. All us cohabitants on this planet, we're all interdependent.
All one family sharing a common home.
That's beautiful and quite spiritual. One doesn't expect that from atheists.
Well, what's your definition of spiritual?
Spiritual, higher level of being, I suppose. I don't know, it's hard to define, but I would certainly think it's related to religious life.
Aha. I notice your hesitation coming up with the word definition for the word spiritual. As a matter of fact, there are many different understandings of what spiritual means. For me, spiritual is that which is not material.
Some of us, whether atheist or religious, are very spiritual as opposed to being materialistic. And having you noticed, there are quite a few religionists who are mucho materialistic.
So what you're saying is there's a whole range of types in atheism, a variety of opinions.
Yes, just as there is in any group.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, but we've run out of time. I've certainly found this discussion to be most informative as well as enjoyable, and I think you've dispelled a lot of the mystery about atheism and atheists.
Now you're a bona fide expert.
No, I wouldn't go that far. Anyway, there are more questions here than we have time to address in one session. Can we do this again?
Of course.
We'd love to.
If you don't call us, we'll call you.
Thank you all so much for coming, and don't worry, I'll call you. And thank you for being with us. Until we meet again, I'm Susan Harris, your host on All You Ever Wanted to Know About.
This script is a composite of ideas and opinions from many involved people, generated in many exploratory discussions on the meaning of life and related topics. Any resemblance of characters in this piece to real people is definitely intended. Thanks to all contributors. For more information about atheism, write to Atheists United, P.O. Box 5329, Sherman Oaks, California, 91413, or call area code 818-594-0678.